What is up, Maniacs? My name is Zach, and I am the Milly Maker Maniac. Welcome to our Week 15 game-by-game breakdown for the DFS main slate. We're going through each game, looking at salaries, and then looking at the spreadsheet I create to look for matchup advantages and start to get a overview of how we're going to navigate this Week 15 slate. Basically, I'm going to show you all the research I did and then tell you who I'm going to pick that's going to fail, but I'm hoping that y'all can learn from all the research I do and you can interpret it correctly and y'all can win, because your boy on a losing streak, I clearly cannot figure it out, but we'll continue to dedicate 40 hours a week to being wrong, and hopefully the information that I give you guys is helpful to you, and maybe one of these days I'll finally freaking bank one. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's get into Chicago and Cleveland. This isn't looking like a game that I really want to target. Cleveland had off game last week against Tennessee as far as their defense goes. They've been a really dominant defense throughout the year, but not as much last week. Very surprising to see that score go where it went last week in the Tennessee and Cleveland game. It made sense to me on the Cleveland side. If you watch the videos, I did talk about Shedeur and how I think he is a very capable NFL passer, throws a very catchable ball, throws with anticipation pretty well. He has pretty good pocket presence. I know a lot of people are dogging on him for continually backing up in the pocket, and that's something he does need to improve on. He needs to do a better job of stepping up in the pocket, but he is very willing and able to make throws under pressure. There's a couple plays last week where he knew he was going to take a big hit, and he threw an absolute dime and took the big hit, but was willing to stand in there. He's got a lot of traits that I think is going to make him a successful NFL quarterback. Seems like Stefanski's coming around on him being a solid NFL quarterback and give him a real shot. I thought it was really dumb to take him out at the end of the game for the 2-point conversion, but I think that's besides the point. If Stefanski can embrace him, I think he can save his job, and they can go into next year with their starting quarterback, is the way I interpret it. I know that is a little contrarian to what a lot of the industry thinks, but I think he is a legitimate NFL starter, and if they lean into that, I think that they could have a really good team next year. All that being said, these grades are cumulative. It's going to be pulling in a lot of their passing offense with Dylan Gabriel and with Joe Flacco early in the year. I think this would be a slight matchup advantage, actually, across the board for Cleveland. They're showing us a slight passing game advantage minus the pass blocking. Pass blocking is definitely a problem. That's something that they need to address in the offseason for sure. I think that they should probably use 2 of their top 3 draft picks on the O-line this next year, especially if they feel comfortable with Shedeur going into next year. But all that being said, this week I could see Shedeur possibly paying off his price and some of the pieces around him. I really like Fannin this week if Njoku's out. But let's go ahead and jump over to pricing. Really no big advantages in this game. It's really just when we look at pricing for Cleveland, there's a few guys that could make sense. But on the Chicago side, I'm probably going to be out on the majority of them. Cleveland, Shedeur is at 4,700. We'll definitely build some lineups with Shedeur at that number. Chicago's been a very hit or miss defense. Basically, they either get turnovers or they give up scoring drives. They don't create many punts. I like the chances for some big plays for Shedeur, and definitely want to mix in some lineups with him. I don't love Judkins this week at 6,300. Samson at 4,300. Samson could actually make a little bit of sense at 4,300. Let's see. 10.8 last week. But yeah, 1,600 or 16 points. He gets close to paying off his price there. Judkins hasn't had a big game since Miami, and even that was a little bit of as underperforming as you can be with 3 touchdowns. So I'm probably out on Judkins. I faded him pretty hard last week. It's not a great matchup. It's not an awful matchup. So we can mix him in a little bit, but I wouldn't have any more than maximum 5% Judkins this week. Judy I like at 4,400. Like I said, Chicago gives up big plays. The most likely person on this offense to have a successful big play to me as Jerry Jeudy. So I want to attack that. I'd have some interest in Tillman and even Bond too. We can sprinkle these guys in as punt plays. Bond only had 2 targets last week. There's one big crossing route that he had and then dropped once he got hit. Tillman had 3 targets. What I'm hoping for is that Stefanski will just start to lean in and let Shedeur run like a full offense rather than try to hide Shedeur, which I think he was doing early in the game last week. And Shedeur was just picking his spots and made good plays when the opportunities presented themselves. And then when they got in comeback mode, Shedeur showed what he can do. But I think if Stefanski leans into it, I think there's some real potential there for them to have some volume as well as some success. Fannin is going to be a smash spot for me this week. I was 25% Fannin last week, and that obviously paid off well. Probably be somewhere in that same ballpark again this week, around 25%, especially if Njoku's out, which what I was seeing initially is that's likely to occur. So if he is out, let's see. I haven't seen any practice reports yet, so we'll keep an eye on that, but I'm assuming that Njoku's out, and if he is, Fannin is going to be a smash spot. And the Browns at 2,700, that's a very attractive price to me. Last week they're at 3,700, and I went there a lot. Didn't work out last week, but I could see that paying off this week against Chicago. Let's get to the Chicago side. Caleb Williams, it didn't look like it in the box score, but I thought he played exceptionally well in that game. And even the last play on 4th and 1, like I don't mind that throw. It was a pretty incredible play by Nixon. Nixon dropped out of the zone that he was supposed to be in and dropped back to the back of the end zone and got that interception. But Caleb Williams was pretty incredible in that game. And I think he has that Josh Allen type it factor in those fourth quarter comebacks. And I really like Chicago to actually do a little something in the playoffs because of that. But the recipe that Chicago is trying to achieve week in and week out is running the football and trying to limit mistakes. And then if they get behind, which they haven't been much in recent weeks, but when they have got behind, they kind of let Williams go into Superman mode, very similar to how the Bills have been operating this season. So I'm going to build some Williams lineups. It'll probably be like 5%-ish, just because I don't really see him having a big week unless they're in comeback mode, which I think is actually possible in this game. I think this is going to be a sneaky fun game. Just the narrative with Shedeur playing well, Chicago being in the middle of a big playoff push, coming off of a tough loss, but playing a really good defense. I think it's going to be a very fun and entertaining game. Now, Cleveland's defense has been exceptional against the run this whole year, except last week where they gave up a 30 spot to Tony Pollard, which no one saw coming. He was 0.3% owned last week, and he was in the Milly Maker lineup, but pretty crazy. Now, I would believe that Cleveland is going to be better against the run this week. They've been good against the run all year long, but there was a chink in the armor last week, so maybe Swift or Monangai can get going. I won't have any more than 5% of these guys, but the thing that we have to remember is what their intent is. Chicago wants to run the football. They want to win games by establishing the run, not turning the ball over. Eventually, I think that they're going to want to try to be a solid defensive team as well. They don't really have the pieces to do that this year. I think they're maximizing what they have right now, and they're playing an aggressive defense to try to get turnovers because I think the reality is they understand that they are mismatched in a lot of different spots and are going to give up points week in, week in. So they're playing an aggressive style to try to get turnovers. Next year, I think they should really lean heavily in free agency and the draft on their defense. But we're not talking about next year. We're talking about this week. There are some holes in their defense. So there is a chance that this game turns into a bit of a shootout. It definitely could. Like the Vegas line's not showing that. Where's our Vegas line at? Yeah, we're at 40 points. So they're expecting a slower pace game. This is in Chicago. It's going to be cold, potential for rain. So I think the type of game would be that Chicago would want would be that they establish a run game and they play pretty good defense. But I think there is some upside for a back and forth affair where the quarterbacks get involved. So this could be a sneaky game that I don't think a lot of people are going to be on, but I do see some potential there. So one game script that makes sense would be a little bit of Swift and a little bit of Monungai. Like I said, no more than 5% there. At receiver, I'm assuming Odunze is going to be out. We'll keep an eye on that. But we can mix in Moore and Burden. I'd be more interested in Burden and Zacchaeus, actually, as the two, just pricing-wise. Moore just doesn't seem like he's a good fit for Ben Johnson's offense. And it doesn't seem like he's where he's supposed to be frequently enough for Caleb Williams to rely on him. So I think Burden and Zacchaeus actually are the better plays at receiver. If Odunze doesn't play, Moore always could get a long touchdown, so I won't completely X him out of my player pool. I'll probably be like 1 or 2% with Moore, but not much. And I'll probably just be like 5%-ish with Burden and maybe like 3% Zacchaeus. So not a big stands by any means, but I will mix them in slightly. Loveland would be the piece that I would like the most out of this offense, probably somewhere between 5 and 10% on Colson Loveland at 3,600. He's become more of a go-to reliable target for Caleb Williams in recent weeks, and he's getting those 5 to 6 targets almost every single week. Defense, I'd much rather have Cleveland's defense than Chicago's defense at that 3,500. All right, let's move on to our next game. We got a high total here with Baltimore and Cincinnati. We're showing, obviously, a big advantage for Baltimore across the board. As we know, the Cincinnati defense is horrific. Baltimore's defense has been better in recent weeks, but Cincinnati's got Joe Burrow back, so these numbers are improving. Show a slight advantage in the pass game and a slight disadvantage in the run game. But Joe Burrow versus Lamar Jackson, we would expect some points to be scored, and that's why we see the big Vegas total here at 52.5. For that game, Lamar obviously has been struggling. The assumption is that he's probably injured, but we don't know. Put up a decent week last week, despite the loss against Pittsburgh. They're still in this, and I think that they can run the table. So Lamar in desperation mode is something I'm interested in, especially Lamar in desperation mode against Cincinnati. The game that they played 2 weeks ago on Thanksgiving, there was a couple plays that really could change the score quite a bit for Lamar, with the Isaiah Likely fumble at the goal line and then the phantom offensive pass interference call against Zay Flowers. Obviously, that could get into the 20s if those plays went the right way. Obviously, it didn't, but I think it's important to have an understanding of that. Like, yeah, he's only scored 9 points against his team last time, but really, he was very, very close to having a 20-plus point game. At 6,400, that's a price that is very attractive for Lamar in this matchup. Again, it doesn't feel like vintage Lamar, but if there were going to be a vintage Lamar game this year, it feels like it would be this game. So I'll probably be somewhere around 10% Lamar this week, just because I just see so much upside there. We got a big advantage for Henry. Let's look at the run game here. We see, I think this is our biggest advantage across the field this week. It looks like actually Washington's run game is in a good spot, but beyond that, this is the best spot for running backs this week, and we like Derrick Henry as the weather gets colder. So Derrick Henry is 7,300 against Cincinnati's defense. Seems like a pretty simple smash spot. Probably be around 20 to 25% Derrick Henry this week. Then we got Zay Flowers. Had a decent week last week. Got back into 20 points for the first time since week 1. 6,300 still feels a little high to me, but we can mix that in a little bit. Bateman is intriguing to me at 3,400. D-Hop, we shot our shot with D-Hop many times this year, but it did not happen. So Bateman last week had 3 targets coming off of the hamstring injury in week 13. Looks like he's starting to ramp up a little bit. This could be that week where he gets a big touchdown or 2. So at 3,400, I think he's a really nice punt play. Then at tight ends, I really like Likely at 3,400. He's been mixing in more targets, and both of these games could have been really big last week or the last couple of weeks if They fumble at the goal line if they don't have the weird non-touchdown call on the no catch last week. Andrews signs a big contract and then comes out and gets one catch for 9 yards. Really interesting, the contract signing there. But I'm not in love with Andrews this week, but at 3,900, we'd have to mix him in a little bit. Like, Cincinnati is awful against tight ends. Baltimore's go-to in the red zone are the tight ends. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for either of these guys or both these guys to have a big week, and at their price, they're very affordable. I want to be 5 to 10% on both guys, somewhere in that range. All right, let's check out the defense. Sorry, Baltimore, 3,200. I don't really love that. I think there's better choices. So we'll go over here on the Cincinnati side. Burrow, 6,600, definitely in play. It's actually a tough spot for Chase Brown, but he's been getting work through the passing game too. We have seen a decent amount of P. Ryan in recent weeks, but he's been hovering right around that 18 mark. I think that's likely where he ends up. So he can 3x his price, but I think it's unlikely that he has 4x potential. So he's not a real favorite tournament play for me. I think there'll be better options in this range. So I probably won't have much Brown, probably in that 5% range. Like, I don't want to X him out of my player pool, but he's definitely somebody that I want to be below the field on. And yeah, it just doesn't feel like a good tournament play to me. I would assume that T. Higgins is out this week. I would want to get to Chase. I actually would rather get to Tinsley than Yosevas for a punt play coming out of this. So I will, I would go Tinsley there. Turn on my notifications here so I stop getting real life work questions. There we go. So yeah, Burrow to Chase, obvious. Gesicki was big last week too. At 3,300, I like him a lot. 6 targets, 6 receptions for 86 and a TD last week. Mixed him into a few lineups, so that was a nice bank. Really killed it at tight end last week. I had Fannin and Gesicki way above the field. So yeah, it was in a good spot there last week. I could see the Bengals defense at 2,400. I don't hate, actually. Lamar's been turning the ball over at a pretty impressive clip in recent weeks, so that could work. So this game, definitely want to have some game stacks of it from both sides. I really like Henry probably the most out of this game, and I'm interested in mixing in all the tight ends out of this game. So there's some pieces that I want to mix in a little bit, but really the core play out of this is Derrick Henry. See if we can have one more vintage week in a really good matchup in cold weather. Yeah, just a lot of things that line up for this to be a good spot for Henry. Move on to our next game. We'll be quick on this one. Arizona and Houston. Looks like a really bad spot for Arizona. I think this is a week that Jacoby Brissett does not score 20 points. There's a decent advantage across the board for Houston. And yeah, I'm interested in mixing in some of the Houston guys and maybe even some CJ Stroud lineups this week. Let's go over and look at pricing. So on the Arizona side, obviously, Michael Wilson is Jerry Rice. We'll see if Harrison plays this week. If Harrison plays, I'll probably just avoid both of them. I would rather have Harrison than Wilson if I were to play one this week. But yeah, I mean, Wilson showed out. He looks like he's a very good player, and that they should have been using him a lot more. Brissett at 5,500, they priced him low enough that maybe we do have to consider it. But last week, he got to the 20 spot, but it was very much in garbage time, which I guess doesn't matter. But yeah, this might even be a tougher matchup than the Rams last week. 5,500 is not awful, though. This game is in Arizona, so that does make the passing games a little bit more intriguing because you don't have to deal with weather. You got a controlled environment. So maybe I will mix in a little Brissett, probably around 5%. And then if Harrison doesn't play, then we got to mix in Wilson. I'd probably be about 10% on Wilson. I think the field will probably be closer to 20%. If that were the case, he was at 40% on last week. That obviously paid off, but I want to be below that this week. I think the run that they're on comes to a stop this week. And obviously, McBride is a beast, but 7,400, it's just so hard for him to pay off that price. We're not gonna go there. And then it looks like Benson's going to be done for the year, so we'll probably Bam Knight will be there, but I don't really have any interest in that against Houston's D. So for the most part, I'm going to fade Arizona. Yeah, I don't really love the defense either. I'd rather have Cincy's D there, actually, which is crazy to say. But for Houston at 5,200, I like CJ Stroud this week. I'll be around 10% Stroud. With the possibility of Chubb being out, we'll keep an eye on that. We'll see if he's going to be able to play this week. If he's not, Woody Marks is going to be a very solid play, somewhere in the 15 to 20% range for me if Chubb is out. Really like Nico this week. Jaden Higgins has been coming along as well. We can see these target numbers. Had 8 targets last week. Oops, sorry, that was too far down. He had 5 targets last week, but he's been 7, 7, 9, 5, 5. Very much more involved at 4,200. We could see him having the 20-point game with these consistent targets and a good matchup. That 20-point game could be coming. So, yeah, he could pay off his price at 4,200 pretty easily, actually. So, I like Higgins a decent amount. I like Nico. He hasn't had like a crazy boom game yet this year. A few 25-point games, but no 30-plus, and we know that he's capable of that 30-plus game. Seems like they're in a better rhythm as well. The offensive line's been playing better. This is a really good matchup against Arizona's defense that's just not good and as well as banged up. So I like Nico quite a bit this week. 15 to 20% Nico this week would be the goal. Probably somewhere around 10% on Higgins too. I like that range. Schultz he doesn't have like huge upside, but he's also solid, like these target numbers. If he gets in the end zone, he can definitely be usable. So probably around 5 to 10% Schultz as well. Texans D, definitely interested in mixing that in. It's going to be a little hard to get to, but it's a massive advantage for them. And Brissett has turned the ball over despite scoring these points week in and week out. Part of why they've been getting in garbage time is because there have been turnovers. So, yeah, I like the Texans here. They're obviously a great defense, and playing a lesser opponent feels like a good spot there. Not a game that I'm going to get like crazy involved with. Probably just on the Houston side is where I'm going to be the most interested in. Let's move on to Jacksonville and New York. Not really interested in anything on the New York side. It looks like Cook might start this week for them at quarterback. We'll keep an eye on that. But if it is Cook that starts at QB, I don't want to touch the Jets at all. Jacksonville is now first in the AFC South. And Trevor Lawrence looked like that dude last week. It looks like he's playing with confidence. I wonder if it feels like he's a guy that rises up for big games and like captures that and kind of plays down to and when they're out of it type thing. So I could see him going on a nice little stretch here. I have a good chunk of him in best ball teams that I still have going too. So hopefully that plays out. I have a lot of teams that are still rolling that are kind of built around the game stack of Jacksonville and Indianapolis in week 17. So hoping a few of those teams can make it to week 17. I'll do a best ball breakdown on what I have advancing. I've got basically 30 shots at the Milly in best ball this year, but I'll break down some of those lineups tomorrow, and we can look at the lineups that are advanced, and then we'll do that each week as we go through the best ball playoffs. Fun time of year. I love this time of year as we get into season-long playoffs, and for fantasy football, we get into best ball playoffs, and then obviously we have a chaotic environment for DFS as a lot of teams are starting to become like permanently out of it. And you're starting to see some young guys get some shots. There's some random guys that start to go off this time of year. So it makes DFS a lot of fun to try to figure out. We have a surprise guest. Little kitten Trisket here is deciding that he wants to be involved in the show today. You got anything to say, little Trisky? No, nothing to say? Say hi to the people. All right. Okay, so Jacksonville and the Jets. I do like the Jacksonville side of this. Bashal Tootin got hurt in the game last week and also fumbled. He did come back into it. So we'll quick look at the Jets side, actually. Breece Hall, I'm probably out on. Yeah, I think I'm just out on this across the board. Yeah, I'm just out on Jets. 0 Jets this week. But Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence, 5,700. I'm definitely okay with that price. Put up a 20 spot last week, but he's been solid in recent weeks. from a fantasy perspective. And yes, last week he was phenomenal in a real life standpoint. Jacoby Myers seems to have really brought that steady presence that Lawrence needs. And I think it's going to make a big difference on the stretch. And I think it's going to open up stuff for Brian Thomas. They're putting Brian Thomas more in the role of what he was last year, where he's more of like a deep threat outside receiver, just running like vertical breaking routes or stop routes off of that, and not a lot of in breaking stuff that he struggled with early in the year. So I like both these receivers this week. I'll probably be pretty even about with both of them. Probably around 10% for both guys. Washington, I don't know if he'll be back this week. We'll keep an eye on that. If he's out, I really like these guys. If he's in, it makes it a little less attractive. But yeah, I think around 10% for Thomas and Myers. Strange had a down game last week, which hurt us, but the targets are consistent. Him getting around 15 points week in and week out is, I think, pretty likely. So I am interested in Strange at 4,200 for sure. Jaguars Z at 3,900. I was excited for that, but that price makes it a little hard to get to. Our next game is the Chiefs and the Chargers. Looks like it's going to be actually a pretty ugly game. The total on this is only 42.5. This is in Kansas City, so it should be cold and maybe a little windy. But it looks like a pretty neutral matchup on the Mahomes side. A slight advantage in the run game for the Chiefs, but bad across the board for the Chargers with their offensive line. It's just an absolute battle for Herbert. I think this is going to be a pretty ugly game, but obviously a very important game for both teams. A lot of playoff implications, like Kansas City has to win out and they need help now. I think Kansas City will win this game is my guess, but I don't know from a DFS standpoint that I'm going to have much out of this. I think it's going to be a fun NFL game, but I don't really see a lot of outcomes where I guess you could have that shootout towards the end of the game, but it just doesn't seem like these two offenses have the pieces they need around the quarterbacks to be it this year. Like, I think Mahomes has been playing incredible over the last few weeks, and there's just been key drops and big moments that have completely changed their season, where last year they made all those plays, but the guys around Mahomes this year have really let him down. So Mahomes is 6,500, just too high, I think, for his range. Hunt at 5,400, we can mix in a little bit. Let's see what the split's been. Pacheco. We're not playing Pacheco, but it's like, does he take enough away from Hunt that we can't play him at all? We could probably mix in Hunt. He's the most likely to score a touchdown, and this is a better matchup than what they've had in recent weeks. Bryce, Worthy, Brown. I don't want to completely X these guys out just because they are connected to Mahomes, and Mahomes can always go off, especially in these environments where they have to. But I don't think they're going to have to do a lot. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. So I'll probably just build, I don't know, 3 or 4 Mahomes lineups, definitely less than 5%. And when I do, I'll mix these guys in. But outside of that, I don't think I'm going to play them. Kelsey at 4,900. I'd much rather have Fannin at 4K than Kelsey at 4,900. So for the most part, I'm going to fade this game. It's a really bad spot for Herbert. Bad O-line. The backfield's tough to get to, too, because they are splitting right down the middle, and it's a tough matchup against the Chiefs' run defense. And then at receiver, we don't really know where it's going. Yeah, I think I'm just going to fade this game primarily, that there's no pieces that it's like, wow, I got to have that in this. Hampton is somewhat intriguing, 5,900, but I mean, they pretty much just split carries last week. I think that could lean more Hampton as it goes on, but it's just a tough matchup, so it's hard to see him really hitting a ceiling game here. So I'll probably just be out on this game in general. The next game is a lot of fun. We got Buffalo and New England. This is obviously has massive playoff implications. We got 2 of the best quarterbacks in the league now. We got Drake May, who is an MVP candidate, and Josh Allen, who I think actually still is in the MVP race. For the most part, I think it's likely going to be Matthew Stafford to take down the MVP. But the two quarterbacks in this game, I think, are the other two likeliest to take down that award if they go crazy these last 4 weeks of the season. They are definitely capable of taking it down. Looks like a massive advantage for Drake May and the passing game this week, and then a slight advantage for Josh Allen in the passing game, but a big advantage in the run game. So it looks like another good James Cook spot, despite him underperforming for us last week. This game could be fun, though. It's in New England. Should be cold weather game, but both these quarterbacks and these teams are built for playing in cold weather. I don't actually think is going to impact the passing game too much as long as we don't have too much wind. So we'll keep an eye on that weather report to see what we're going to end up with there. Allen at 7,500. We definitely have to mix him in again. Like he's in that time of a year where he tends to go hero mode. And if they need him to go hero mode in this game, I very much think that he will. They are going after a Super Bowl, and it's looking like he's going to have an opportunity to possibly be in the playoffs without Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes not being in the playoffs. Like, they see their opportunity. They see their window. And I think Josh Allen is going to go into that Superman mode multiple times down the stretch here to do everything he can to get them into the Super Bowl and eventually take it down. James Cook at 8K. I was hoping for a little bit more of a discount there. It's interesting that Buffalo's only given up the third most points to running backs, but they consistently grade really bad against the run. Teams just, for whatever reason, haven't leaned into it that much this year. I think part of it is because their passing defense is pretty bad as well. Oh, sorry, we're looking at New England here. New England has been good against the run. My bad on that. But, yeah, so even though it does show an advantage here, I think that's primarily just because the Bills have been so good against running the ball this year. New England has been good against the run, though. So Cook probably isn't going to be as highly owned as what we're seeing on the matchup spreadsheet would indicate. So I'll probably be around 10% to 15% Cook, and I think that'll be above the field this week. I don't want to mess with any of those receivers. If I'm playing Allen, I'm playing him naked or I'm playing him with Kincaid. That is how I'm going to do it moving forward. Yeah, so in this game, I would love like an Allen with the thing about New England, it's a little bit hard to figure out who the comeback is, but Allen with a Henderson or Allen with a Butte or a Diggs or even a Hunter Henry as a comeback. I like attacking it that way if I'm playing Allen. You don't necessarily have to stack Allen. Last week, the best stacking partner was Dawson Knox, but it's so random who it is, and you have to waste so many lineups to get there. And most of the time, they really don't hit a ceiling too hard for any one player because they spread the ball around so much. So that's why Josh Allen can have these 40-point games. Like when he had this game, week 11 against Tampa, no, he didn't really bring anybody along with him. He had 3 passing touchdowns, went to 3 different guys, and none of those guys had volume, and he had 3 rushing touchdowns. So he scores 47, and he doesn't bring anybody along with him. He's kind of a unique player in that way. So that's why I don't feel like you need to stack Josh Allen. Then we got Drake May here. With May, I would stack him you could do it with Henderson. Henderson's definitely a candidate to catch like a wheel route out of the backfield and score a long touchdown or a screen pass. So I'm really good with stacking with Henderson. And then Diggs and Butte would be the go-to guys that I would want in this matchup. Butte actually would be the more attractive one to me. I think he is more likely to have those big scoring plays, which we've seen in some weeks, like against New Orleans. He had a couple big plays. He's hovering around that 5 target range, but when he gets, he's the most likely to have that big play. So, like I said, that's why I would have a little bit more interest in him more than Diggs. I like Henry week in and week out. 4,400 in this matchup, it's not as attractive. I would rather have Fan in here, but I'll mix him in a little bit with my Drake May lineups. I'm probably going to end up 10% with both of these quarterbacks in my lineups. I really like Diggs. I really like Butte. I'm okay with Diggs. Probably be about 10%. Boutte will play him outside of May stacks. Not a ton, but some. And then Diggs, the last time they played the Bills, he had his biggest game of the year, 27 spots. So that's something we have to consider as well. So I'll probably be around 8% Diggs. We can mix in Hollins a little bit too. This looks like a fun game, though. I definitely want pieces of this. I don't think I'm going to get to Ramondre. Yeah, I'd be more interested in Henderson. I think he just has more upside. All right, let's move on. Got 13 games to get through, so I know this is going to be a long episode, so I'll try to pick up the pace a little bit. Let's talk about the Giants and the Commanders. This looks like an absolute smash spot for Jackson Dart. This looks like a great game for both teams, actually. Looks like a really good spot for the run game. We'll see if Jaden Daniels plays this week. If Jaden Daniels plays this week, I will be all over this game. This might be my favorite game of the week if Daniels plays. But massive advantage. Let's go back and look at this real quick. So massive advantage in the pass game for both teams and massive advantage in the run game for both teams. If Tracy's out, I really like Singletary. We'll see how that plays out. See if we have any updates. Looks like he will play. So that does kill Singletary a little bit. Kind of intrigued in Singletary once he went out last week as 20-pointer. But if they're both there, man, we might have to mix them in both a little bit, like 3% each. Kind of like what I did with Monongai and Swift last week. But Dart at 5,600, we're going to have a lot of. And Slayton has hurt me so much this year. There's been so many close calls on Slayton having massive weeks when I've had a lot of Slayton. But I think I'm going to load up on it again. Probably be about 30% Slayton this week. Hopefully he doesn't break my heart again. But he's just had so many opportunities to have big weeks. Washington's pass defense is horrific. They've been bad all year long. Dart loves to go for the big play. Slayton seems like the most likely guy to get that big play. All of it lines up for Slayton to have a big week, which means I will have a ton of him, and he will have a touchdown called back or get injured early in the game or drop a touchdown pass is what that means. But I will not learn my lesson. I will go back to 30% Slayton and have my heart broken once again because that's what I do as the Milly Maker Maniac. I thought the whole point of this when I started this was to make $1 million, but now I understand it's to do this each week to lose and to feel the misery. That's why I do this. I love the misery. But maybe 1 week I will be lucky and not a moron that puts 30% Slayton in their lineups for the 5th time this season and gets destroyed by it. I definitely am interested in Wan'Dale as well. He's going to get crazy volume. He can get there multiple ways at his price. Like he can get to 18 without scoring a touchdown. And if he does get into the end zone, then obviously we have that big 30-point upside. So Wan'Dale we like as well, probably about 20%. I like this passing game. And Theo Johnson, I think, is a really nice option at 3,500 as well. So Dart will be one of my highest rostered, if not my highest rostered quarterback this week. Probably about 20% there, and then mixing in with all the pass catchers. And I will sprinkle in both running backs if they both play. Really sad. I had so many shares of Scatterboo and Best Ball. I have so many teams in that advance that have Scatterboo that would look so sick if he was healthy, but he's not. So that is what it is. On the Washington side, we got Jaden Daniels. I think they probably hold him out, but we'll see. If he plays, I would love to go back there. He was my highest roster quarterback last week. Obviously, that hurt us last week, but we could see that turn around this week. Chris Rodriguez at 4,900. I like that a lot in this matchup. Probably go about 10% Rodriguez. I don't want to touch any of the other running backs. Like you could see it for JCM, but his carries have really gone down in recent weeks. Love McLaurin. Love Debo. Is Noah Brown actually going to play? He lives. Maybe we could mix in some Noah Brown, but McLaurin and Debo are good values. I like this range. They're both capable of getting to 20 points in this matchup for sure. Really sad to see Ertz, probably a career-ending injury last week. Yeah, he was a good player for a long time. Sad to see a career end like that. We got John Bates, but Ben Sinnott. Hearing a lot of comparisons to him and Trey McBride. He hasn't done anything, but neither had Trey McBride before Ertz got hurt in Arizona. I don't know. I might build a few Sinnott lineups just for fun, maybe 2, but I would avoid this. I primarily go McLaurin and Debo with Daniels, but I also like the stack of Rodriguez plus one of these receivers as well. This game, I think, has the potential to be a back-and-forth affair, especially if Daniels plays. This could be a game that obviously has no playoff implications, has a lot of draft implications, but for fantasy purposes, I think this game could be quite incredible. Could really go off. What's the over on this game, or the point total? 47.5 here, so I thought that would actually be higher with as bad as these defenses have been. All right, down the stretch we go. So we have Vegas and Philadelphia. Not playing anything on Vegas. We don't even need to look at pricing there. They're garbage. It's an awful matchup for them across the board. Not interested. Will be interested in Philly's D. And I'm very interested in a lot of Philly's offense. It's a fantastic advantage for them. They're in this situation where they looked horrible on that Sunday night or Monday Night Football, whatever it was. They looked horrific. And yeah, so obviously everybody is probably going to be fading Philly. A.J. Brown's price has been going up, but rightfully so. He's been putting up bigger games in recent weeks. 6,800 definitely would want a lot of that. This is a spot that feels great for Devontae Smith in my mind too. He's getting the targets, just hasn't scored, but I think this could be a really good week for both these guys. Could be a big breakout week for Barkley too. He had a decent week last week, but yeah, if he's had one big game all year long, I feel like this could be that game, the second one. And then Jalen obviously coming off one of his worst performances of his career, but we look at this like you can pretty much just count on him getting 20 plus every week. Recent weeks have been tough, but I'm going to go back to it. I believe in the pedigree, and I believe in his ability to rise above it. The play callers are definitely something. Like what they're doing it's a mess there. There seems to be no rhythm. Like there are a lot of negatives, but this team is just too talented, and Vegas is so just god awful. And we also know where to go across the board here. Like Goddard 3,800 is a good value too. It's Barkley, it's Brown and Smith, and it's Goddard. Like that's where all the fantasy points are going. We don't have to worry about mixing in anything beyond that. So I will have a ton of Eagles lineups. I'll probably be about, 15% Hurts, probably 15%-ish or so on Barkley, and about the same, probably 20% for both Brown and Smith is the range that I want to be in, and then about 10% Goddard. So I'll be heavy on the Eagles across the board this week. And I anticipate I'll probably be above the field on all that, but we'll see. Maybe the field is sharper just because they know that they're playing Vegas. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, Denver and Green Bay. This game looks like it's going to be kind of a tough defensive battle. It's in Denver. Nothing as far as advantages go. There's nothing too crazy. It looks like a disadvantage for the Broncos passing game, slight advantage in the run game, and then okay matchup for the Packers passing game. Like definitely not a massive advantage, but a slight advantage, and then a negative advantage or disadvantage in the run game. So we look at this one. I think it's unlikely that a ceiling comes out of this game unless it's a fourth quarter back and forth affair. But I think for the majority of the game, it's going to be pretty slow moving, grind out type game. Jordan Love at 5,400 though. We can mix in. He's picked it up quite a bit in recent weeks, 25 and 20 in the last 2 games. Denver is a better defense than both Detroit and Chicago, but yeah, I mean, he's just played really well. Jacobs at 6,900 looks like a tough spot for him. I probably won't get there too much, but I'll do at least 5% just because they're going to rely on him on big games, and this is a big game for them as they are making the playoff push. I like Watson. I like Dobbs. I like Reed too. Reed and Watson actually be my two favorite out of this group. Mixon, Dobbs, he had a 0 spot last week, but he's on the field a lot. But I think Reed and Watson are the most likely to score 20. And Watson's playing like a true number one. And getting a true number one at 5,500 is a pretty sweet option. Their tight ends aren't doing anything. So really out of this game, like I'll probably have, we'll say 5 to 8% love. And then Watson and Reed, I'll probably be about 10 to 15% with both those guys. I will play with them a little bit outside of love lineups. And then Jacobs, I'll sprinkle in a little bit, but I don't think this is likely to be a ceiling game for him. On the Denver side, Harvey is somewhat intriguing at 6K just because you expect him to get all the volume. He got all the touches last week and paid it off. That also seems like that's their best plan of attack against this Packers defense is not go against this secondary and this pass rush with Bo Nix. I probably will play 2 Bo Nix lineups. I really do not believe that he can hit a ceiling in this game, but he seems to do it in random spots, and so I'll mix it in a little bit. Probably don't want to really mess with these receivers outside of my Nix stacks just because this Green Bay secondary is elite, matched with this Green Bay pass rush, which is obviously elite with Micah Parsons. To me, this just looks like a really good setup for Bo Nix to have a few turnovers. The only way I can see Nix paying off is if he has one of those just like crazy fourth quarter comebacks that comes out of nowhere and he puts up like 20 points in just the fourth quarter. But if it doesn't happen that way, I don't see him paying off a price that could win us a tournament. Denver's D is, I think there's better options at 3,400. Packers D, though, at 2,800. That might be my favorite defensive price that we've seen so far. I think Bo Nix is very likely to throw a pick or two this week. So that is where I'm going. I'm probably the most negative Broncos fan out there, but I think that this team is, in a lot of ways, is a fraud, and I think that they will see an early exit in the playoffs. All right, we got 4 more games to go, my friends. Hang in there. We are almost through it. We got Detroit against the Rams with the highest total on the slate, 55.5. Very interesting to me. I think there is a lot of ways that this game hits the under. This is in LA, so Detroit's going to have to make the long trip out there. And this Rams defense has the advantage across the board. It is a -4 and a -2 in my grading system for the quarterback and the running backs here. But this is obviously a playoff atmosphere. Detroit needs this game. The Rams need this game to try to lock up that 1 seed. There's so much movement that can happen in the NFC playoff picture right now. It is so tight. And you have the NFC North and the NFC West where it's just so top heavy. You have 3 teams in each division that legitimately could be the 1 seed or out of the playoffs over the next 4 weeks. So we'll see how this plays out. Obviously, we see this disadvantage for Detroit, but we know in a playoff environment that these guys are going to get up for this game, and we can rely on some of the studs like Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't want to go away from in a game that has a 54.5 point total. The Rams are a 6-point favorite. To me, though, like if you get into that comeback mode, if Detroit does get behind, that could be the environment where Goff has that big game. So despite this disadvantage, I do still have plenty of interest in this game. Let's look at the pricing here and see how interested are we going to be. Goff is 6,100. We can work with that. Gibbs at 8,800. Not going to be a smash spot by any means. Getting to a ceiling seems hard here, but he can do it against pretty much anybody. Damn, he's had some big games. Been kind of every other. I'll probably be somewhere around 10% Gibbs. I don't want to go too crazy on it. All right, Amon-Ra St. Brown coming off of the ankle injury that he played through, but he's got a little bit more rest, but he looked fine in that game. I'm sure he was shot up with all sorts of Toradol, but Hopefully there's not any long-term effects from playing on that, but it looks like he is going to be okay. JMO's price has come up quite a bit. So I probably won't play these guys too much outside of golf stacks or game stacks. Here, the thing about this game is the pricing is going to make it hard to get to these guys. Yeah, Dwelly hasn't really done anything. So I don't even think I want to do the full punt. Lions also lost Deion Branch for the year at safety with a torn Achilles, awful injury, and he's a big part of their defense too. So it changes, like their secondary. It takes a huge hit with him being gone for the year. So I probably won't get to the Lions. Really, I feel like the Rams are going to have success on offense. The question is can Detroit just go toe-to-toe with them and it just be a massive shootout? There's a lot of scenarios in which they can't. So I'll play some just Rams lineups and without any comebacks. But I'll also play some game stacks for Detroit where Jared Goff has that 4-touchdown game and a win or a loss where they're going back and forth. That could be really attractive. And you know who to go with too. It's pretty much basically out of this on Detroit, we only need 4 guys total that I'm going to build. I'm not going to mess with Montgomery this week. I would go Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, J-Mo Williams, and Goff. Combination of those 4 guys are really all I'm going to touch in this game from Detroit this week. Now, Stafford, it's tough to see Stafford pay off that price. 7K, his biggest games are these 27, I think actually he had 130-point game. I mean, he's had plenty of these games, but they're not tournament winning scores. He's QB 4 or 5 at that price. It's hard to get there. So what I might do is I might not play Stafford, but play him having solid weeks like he has, but not enough to win a tournament. Puka obviously was an absolute beast last week. Devontae did not get in the end zone, but he has done so many times. The thing about Devontae, where he's priced right now, he can 3x that price pretty consistently, but he's never really going to 4x that price just because he's not getting the yardage. He's not having massive yardage games. He's only had 100-yard game all season long, but he's getting in the end zone. So I would definitely be more intrigued in Puka because they're 1,500 apart, which is a bigger gap this week. But Puka has this 40-point upside that we don't really see from Devontae. And it's just tough to get there, really. Same conundrum I had last week. I was below the field on Nakua. I had a good chunk of him, but it was below it just because of the price I thought was hard to pay off. Obviously, he did pay it off. But it's hard to figure this one out. I kind of like Corum. I mixed him in a little bit last week. But it really is just a true split. So it makes it hard to go to either one of these guys. But I think you can mix in a little bit of Corum just because he's so cheap that if they split, but he gets the touchdown, 15 is okay at 4,800. And he obviously can get to 30 where he can 6x his price there. So we can mix him in a little bit. I'm not going to take any big stands, probably 3% each. That's what I did last week. I just did 3% each on these guys because I thought it was hard for either one of them to hit a big ceiling game. But with Corum, it makes a little bit more sense for him to pay off this price. It's hard to get here. Highest total of the week, so in a huge game. So you can see that being big moments for both these guys. So we will mix it in. I probably will just do this primarily in game stacks with Goff is probably how I will play it. Where I will go Goff plus Amon-Ra plus Gibbs or plus Jameson Williams, mix some combination there, and then have the comeback either be Devontae or Puka. That will be primarily how I play this game. I'm intrigued in the Rams D too. I could see this. If this game hits the under, what I think is most likely to happen is that Detroit flops. I don't see the Rams offense really getting slowed down. by this hampered Detroit defense now. So if it hits the under, which I actually would bet the under on this game, honestly, I think it's that Detroit doesn't get there because this defense is so solid, and you can see a game where Goff is under duress and throws some interceptions like he has done. We've seen that in the past. Fun game, though. Very excited to watch this game. I don't know if it's going to be as epic as we would expect it to be for DFS purposes with its total, because of how everybody is pricing it. It's just hard for a lot of these players in this game to pay off their price. And I can see a lot of scenarios where there's no ceiling games that come out of this, and the guys just have average games at their price points. They're not really usable for a DFS tournament. So I will play this game, but I do see an outcome where it underperforms and it's not really needed for DFS purposes this week. All right, we got 3 more to go, my friends. We got Carolina and New Orleans next. Just a slight advantage in the passing game for Carolina, but it has been better in recent weeks. A decent advantage in the run game. And for New Orleans, a slight advantage in the pass game, which has been better in recent weeks as well with Tyler Shuck, and a slight advantage in the run game. So not a massive advantage for either offense, but an advantage for both offenses. So we want to mix this game in for sure. Let's do the Carolina side first. Bryce Young, 5,100. We'll definitely mix that in. He's had a few random big games throughout the year. They're probably going to try to rely on the run game a lot. Chuba at 4,600. We'll want to mix him in. Probably be about 5% on Chuba. Rico at 6,600. I want to mix that in too. I think everybody's going to assume that Chuba's going to get more work this week, but Dowdle has still been really solid. Yeah, it's still had 18 carries against the Rams, which is one of the toughest matchups out there for running backs, and still got 18 touches, 58 yards, and a couple receptions. So, yeah, I like Dowdle. Probably about 10% Dowdle, and then 5% Chuba. Chuba can pay that price off with just one big screenplay. He had 17 touches. I mean, they had a lot of carries last week. So I'm mixing both those guys. And then I like both McMillan and Coker. Coker has been getting more and more involved as he's got back, which I have a ton of Coker in the best ball playoffs. So I am a cokehead. I very much hope that it pays off the price. I thought when they traded Thielen, I thought that I was just going to dominate in best ball with Coker, and then he got hurt and missed 6 weeks of the season. But it's been a slow burn, but he's coming along. He's coming along. Maybe he can pay off for us in the best ball playoffs and maybe this week in fantasy. He'll be probably one of my favorite punt plays of the week at 3,900. I bet I'll probably end up somewhere around 10% on Coker this week. And not really interested in their tight ends. Defense is okay. I think I'd rather have the Rams, though, in that price range. So probably 10% for both the receivers, 5% Young, and then 10% and 5% for Dowdle. And Hubbard is the range I will go. On the New Orleans side, see if we get Kamara back. If we don't get Kamara back, then I would have some interest in Neal. He looked pretty solid last week. 3x'd his price. So what we got Shuck at? Shuck's at 4,900. Definitely going to be interested in that. 5 to 10% there. Then Olave, 6,200. Definitely can get there. Had a tough week last week. But, yeah, I mean, he's been solid throughout the year. He getting a lot of double-digit target games. I don't know why we're not seeing the target numbers for them last week, but coming off the big game, he did have 3 receptions last week. Tipton didn't do anything last week. Tipton did nothing. So, Vele and Olave, I would rather have Coker around this range, but I would definitely mix in Vele some. Juwan Johnson. I don't know why the Saints targets aren't showing up, but yeah, could be somewhat intriguing. I think there's better tight end plays in that range, though, honestly. So probably pass there. Primarily Shuck and the 2 pass catchers would be my biggest interest on this side. And if Kamara's out, no info there yet, so we'll keep an eye on that. But if Kamara's out, then we would definitely be interested in playing Neal there. 2 more games, my friend. Let's jump over to Indianapolis and Seattle. We might see Phillip Rivers this week, which would be absolute insanity. Like, I want to see it. I think it'd be like the dopest story ever if he came in off the couch, literally probably going to be in the Hall of Fame next year if he doesn't come back and play after not playing for 4 years. Has a son just as old as Riley Leonard. He has grandkids. Dude's 44 years old, hasn't played in 4 years. Who knows if he's been working out? But, I mean, it's tough. It sucks for Indy. So sad for Indy. Like, the way that the last few weeks have run out with injuries and the hopes for their season. It is very, very sad, disappointing, but be crazy if we saw Phillip Rivers this week. But we very well might. But I think it's tough to really get to anything on the Indy side this week. It just feels like the world is against them right now. It would just have to be a Jonathan Taylor game, and against the Seattle defense, I think it's going to be very tough for that to happen. On the other side, it looks like an awesome spot for the Seattle offense across the board. Huge advantage for the passing game. Solid, actually really good advantage for the run game as well. So yeah, this looks like a spot where we want to play Seattle's D and Seattle's offense, and hopefully they do enough. They get enough volume to pay off for a DFS standpoint. There is an outcome where this game just misses completely because Seattle's not pushed enough. All right, so we got Sam Darnold at 5,800. I'll be around that 10% range with Darnold as well. I really like that price. Charbonnet and Walker, the split makes it tough. I think Walker's the better play. I think he has, we haven't really seen the big game yet, but he has that potential for that massive, massive game where he has, a couple breakaway runs. So I'll probably be about 5% on both of these guys, honestly. JSN, I could see him. I like him better than Puka this week. I just think he has a higher likelihood of getting a ceiling game. Indianapolis is just devastated in the secondary too. Travarius Ward is likely going to be out again, and we're likely to see Sauce Gardner out. So it just looks like a spot for JSN to just absolutely eat. I probably would just do Darnold and JSN as my core there. Could do a couple lineups where I tack on Shaheed. He got more involved last week, but we haven't seen much. I have a feeling that they're kind of saving some of the bigger plays for bigger moments that they have drawn up for Shaheed. I think they might be saving some of those for the playoffs. I think like I said, I think in the playoffs he could make a much bigger impact, but on a week-to-week basis, I don't know that he's going to be hyper involved at any point. I think 5 targets is probably his ceiling, which we did see last week. But he could turn one of those targets into a big play and pay off his price. So it's not an awful play at 4,600, but it's not one that I want to smash either. Incup is a really solid role player for them, but he's not going to be a solid fantasy asset for the rest of his career, I don't think. Barner has been getting a lot of targets. Didn't do much for us last week. Killed us in our cash lineup, but we could tack him onto a Darnold stack as well. So yeah, I like the main stack out of here at Darnold and JSN. It's obvious, but it's obvious for a reason. And I also like Seattle's D. This would be my favorite pay-up defense, especially if Rivers plays. Let's look at the other side, see if they even have Rivers on here. They do. And they don't have him at the min price, that's insane. Dude, that blows my mind that they didn't make him the min price for a 44-year-old dude walking in and off the street after not playing for 4 years. That's crazy. Sucks that we don't get late season Anthony Richardson. I do have some best ball shares of him in the playoffs right now. That would be dope if he could come back and do some crazy stuff. But yeah, doesn't look like it's going to happen. Tough run out for Anthony Richardson. Would have loved to have seen him get a spot here at the end of the year, but that's not going to. It's going to play out. Jonathan Taylor, 8,500. I just think if Seattle's able to just lock in on them running the ball, which I think that they will be able to do, it's hard to see a ceiling game for him. But maybe if they have the box filled and he finds one gap, he can get a big run here or there. But I think it's gonna be really hard to pay off the 8,500. So I'll say 5% Taylor. All of their receivers take a big hit. I like to gamble. I like to act a fool, and I think it just would be so sick if Rivers came in and just balled out. So unlikely, like less than 1% likelihood of happening, but just for shits and giggles, I think I probably will build a few Phillip Rivers lineups if it looks like he's going to play. Be fun, but I think unlikely. Like I really don't think we can touch anybody in this offense this week minus Taylor, and even that I don't want more than 5% of. Would be dope though. Would be a phenomenal story if he somehow was able to come in and ball out. Grandpa Rivers doing it. All right, last game, we got Tennessee and San Francisco. We saw Tennessee do a little something last week against a really good defense. Did not see that coming. Wasn't really a Cam Ward game, though. It was much more the running game. So might mix in a little Tony Pollard this week. But really, I'm interested in on the San Francisco side. Looked like a really good spot for San Fran. Kind of a tune-up game for them. And, like, they need to be winning these games. Like, the playoff picture is so tight. Like, they have to win these games to make sure that they get in. And they are still very much in it for the division. So this game means a lot. They're not going to mess around with this game. McCaffrey at 9K. Yeah, that's the one that's the obvious one. McCaffrey at 9K. Feel like that's where the field's going to go. Obviously, with Justin Simmons being back for the Jeffrey Simmons, for Tennessee coming back, their defense has been a lot better since he has been back in the run game, but McCaffrey can get there through the passing game very easily. So he's kind of, these 35-point games, 40-point games, 37. He can 4X that. He can 4X that pretty easily. So I'll probably be 20%-ish McCaffrey this week. Love these receivers and Jennings and Pearsall at this price. I think I'll be living. Little ones come back to say hi again for the last matchup of the week. But I'll probably be, I think I'll be hovering in that 5K range for wide receiver quite a bit. Like if we pull out of this and we just go to who all is in there. Like we liked Watson, we like McLaurin, we like Debo, like Juwan, like Pearsall. Yeah, there's a good chunk in that range that we like. We like Myers, we like Thomas, we like Smith. We like Wandale. Yeah, that 5K range is really going to be where I'll be living quite a bit this week. I'll get some BTJ in there. So, yeah, we'll be in that range quite a bit. But Pearsall and Jennings are going to be a big part of that. It feels like a Pearsall spot for me. I know he hasn't done much since he's come back, but this feels like a good get-right spot where we get more like what we saw in week 3. Jennings is definitely more of the go-to guy and has been getting more targets as we get down the stretch here. But this feels like it could be a spot for Pearsall. And then obviously we got Kittle. Kittle will be my favorite pay-up option at tight end. Let's look at just the overall range there. Yeah, like I'm probably not getting to Bowers this week. Kittle will probably be my highest priced tight end. And then it'll be Kittle, Kincaid, Henry, a little bit of Strange. A ton of Fannin. Fannin will be our highest owned for sure. And then we can get into more of the punt range with some guys we like in that. Gesicki, likely. We mix in a little Goddard, a little Loveland. So, like the San Francisco side. Like this passing game. The stacks with McCaffrey plus a pass catcher. Obviously, like Purdy plus some pass catchers, including McCaffrey mixed in there. A lot of good options coming out of this game. On the Tennessee side, probably won't get to too much Cam Ward. This defense has actually settled in a little bit better than what I was anticipating with all the injuries they've had. Guys have stepped up. They've been okay. They haven't been great, but they've been okay. And then at running back, Pollard's priced up to 5,200. Crazy how he came out of nowhere against the Browns. It just makes zero sense. That was a crazy one. So we can mix in Pollard a little bit, but I don't know, like in that range, I think I'd rather have Neal. I'd rather have Monungai. I'd rather have Rodriguez for sure. Rodriguez is the one that jumps off the page there. I'd rather have Corum. Maybe some. I'll say 3% Dowdle. That'll probably, 3% Pollard. I don't really want to get in this range either. Yeah, I might build like 4 Ward lineups and mix in these guys there, but beyond that, I'm not touching it. All right, let's build a lineup, my friends, and get the hell out of here. Okay, I am going to do a Josh Allen hero game. We're going to do him naked, and we will bring along, we'll do a comeback here. Where did this game go? A lot of fun games to stack. This is a fun slate. We'll get Booty in there. Yeah, I think we'll just leave it at that for now. And then let's go over here to this Baltimore and Cincinnati game. We want Henry. I want Chase. I'm going to go back there. He hurt us last week, but with Higgins probably out, yeah, I like that spot. So we got 2 game stacks out of the gates. Let's look at running back. It'd be hard to pay up in this range. Let's see if we can plug in a defense here. Let's go ahead and plug in Fannin, actually, so we can get an idea of where our options are. Then we'll go to a defense. Let's go Packers at 2,800 against Bo Nix. Leaves us 5,100 remaining. Let's go down here and get Rodriguez. Just want to look at his carries again. 10, 11, 15. It's a much better matchup than what he's had in recent weeks. So, yeah, give it to me. Let's go Chris Rodriguez against the Giants' awful run defense. Then a wide receiver, we can get in that 5K range. I'm going to trust my gut here. I'm going to go with Pearsall. I know that everything is pointing towards it. Jennings more than Pearsall, but a few weeks off of the injury, getting more comfortable. One of the better matchups they've had. This is in San Francisco too, so the weather should be good. Yeah, it just looks like a good spot to me. Let's just go both receivers. Let's go that Purdy has a solid game, but maybe he only throws for, like 250 yards and 3 touchdowns, but all 3 of them are split up between Pearsall and Jennings. Then Josh Allen has that like massive 40-point game, but doesn't really bring anybody along with him. That's how we'll play that. So Purdy has a good day. His pass catchers come along with him, but he's not the QB you need. And then we got Booty with the big play against Buffalo. Josh Allen just going Superman. Derrick Henry in a great matchup, going vintage Derrick Henry. Chris Rodriguez has a 2-touchdown game against the awful New York Giants defense, run defense. And then Jamar Chase, we get a vintage 40-point Jamar Chase game. And the Packers D turn the ball over a few times against Bo Nix and take 1 to the house. And then Harold Fannin is Shedeur Sanders' go-to guy moving forward. He gets 10 targets. He gets 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He just absolutely smashes. And that is how we win $1 million in Week 15. My friends, thanks for hanging in there. I know this was a long one, a lot to break down in a big 13-game slate. Hit me up if you are interested in the spreadsheet. I'm happy to send that to you. Just send me an email at millymakermaniac@gmail.com, and I will share that with you for free. And in the comments, please let me know who you think the slate breaker is. I love adding guys into my player pool from the comments because what I found is, despite all my research, I'm really good at picking the wrong guys. Y'all in the comments know what the hell's going on, though. So hopefully you can use some of the information that I've passed along here, and you can win some money, but we know I'm probably going to lose money in Week 15. But we will have the best ball breakdown. I'll just kind of go over some of my lineups that I have alive and what is advanced in my best ball lineups as we go into the playoffs there. I will do that video tomorrow, and then on Saturday, I will have the player pool breakdown and start looking at some of the lineups that we've built out. My friends, have a great week. We will see you tomorrow for the best ball video. Thanks so much. Like and subscribe.